Let us now begin our next special session and also the last session for this conference. It is the one that everyone has been eagerly looking forward for. It is about thoughts and reflections on $5 trillion economy. The chairman for the session, Dr. Subramanian Swamy, is an Indian economist, educationist, statistician, and politician who serves as a member of the parliament in Rajya Sabha. Swamy has served as a member of the Planning Commission of India and was a cabinet minister in the Chandrasekhar government. Mr. Swamy was one of the founding members of the Janata Party. He served as the party's president since its inception in 1990 till 2013 when it got merged with BJP. He is also an anti-corruption crusader and has accolades of filing and winning high-profile sensitive cases. He was elected to the Lok Sabha 5 times between 1974 and 1999. With this, I welcome Dr. Subramanian Swamy to this session. Welcome, sir. The speaker for this session, Dr. M.R. Venkatesh, is an advocate based in New Delhi, practicing criminal laws, economic offences, and serious financial frauds. He is a designated partner in Agastya Legal LLP and heads advisory and litigation service. MRV, as he is popularly known, became a chartered accountant in 1992 with an All India rank. In 2018, he was awarded a doctorate for his thesis on evaluating the impact of minimum support price and input subsidies on the farm sector in the 4 southern states of India. He is a regular panelist for primetime shows on national television and a well recognized columnist in leading media publications in India. Welcome to the session, sir. Over to the chairman and the speaker.
Well, am I the chairman? Yes, I think I have that role as a chairman, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because of the fact there was a bit of a clash, so I will make my presentation, motivate the debate, and then I will go over to the other program that I am due from on this online matter in another situation. So first of all, thank you very much, the Karnataka State Chartered Accountants Association. I've appeared before this association earlier also. A very dynamic group, a very well-read, well-informed group. So it's a pleasure for me to speak on it. Now, the topic given to me is $5 trillion economy, thoughts and reflections. Now, there is a difference between the meaning of thought and the meaning of reflection, and I'd like to begin by just making that difference. Thought is about reasoning in the abstract. That is, you have a target, like $5 trillion. How do you go about achieving it? What does it imply for the policy of the government? So that is the thought where you are structuring the achievement of an objective. And as far as reflection is concerned, it's got more to do with what we think is desirable and what is the nation's destiny that we want to advance. For instance, the United States has in their reflections, they say we are for the pursuit of pleasure. Our ancient ideology was always that we want what later on Deen Dayal Upadhyay said was integral humanism. That is a advancement in material prosperity, but harmonized with spiritual advancement. So then we had a system where we venerated those people who didn't have anything. For example, and that's why they are called Gyanis and Tyagis. Mahatma Gandhi wore just a lion cloth, and the whole world used to wonder, how can the people of India follow a man who is not even properly dressed? That's India. All are sadhus, sannyasis. They are highly venerated. Even the king will go and bow before them in those olden days, because they were Gyanis and they were also Tyagis. So therefore, we have never had a one-dimensional pursuit of wealth or economics. Economics has to be seen in the broad context. But the concept of $5 trillion in GDP is an important concept. And the real thing is we must know how realistic it is in the present situation and what needs to be done. I would certainly like not only 5 trillion, I would like even much more. But you must know the consequences of deciding on that. When the Prime Minister stated on 26th May 2019 that in the coming 5 years, I want to achieve a GDP of $5 trillion. And that is now stuck and it's going all over, even in the Planning Commission and all that, $5 trillion economy, $5 trillion. You have also given me a topic. But what is the thought behind it? How do you achieve $5 trillion when in May 2019, the GDP was only half that? That means you want to double the GDP from $2.5 trillion to $5 trillion. And what does that mean? Now, mathematical calculations which I have done show that if you want to double in 5 years, then the rate of growth you would require is 14.4% per year. Now, that's a huge growth rate, because in the last 5-6 years, our growth rate has been declining. Even before Corona, it has been declining steadily. It started with in 2015 with 8.1% GDP growth rate and went on systematically decreasing. And the last quarter of the financial year 2019-20, that is January 1, 2020 to March 31st, 2020, which is just before the Corona pandemic hit us, the growth rate was only 3.1%. And then in the first quarter of 2021, that is 1st April to June 30th, the growth rate was minus 23.9%. And of course, we have not been able to collect full data. Most of it is all guesses. I won't go into it, but we have been staying in the minus no matter how many times you're being told in the media and by the government that we have V-shaped, we have turned around and so on. Unless I get the full data, I cannot comment on it. But the fact is that we have gone back. So now to achieve 5 trillion in the coming 5 years, starting from the base we will be left with, is going to be even more than 14.4%. And is that practical? Well, I do think that it's possible. And now my reflection tells me this, that it is possible for India to get 14.4% for a period of 5-10 years. And what are the parameters for that? I will explain to you just now. But I would say that GDP in constant prices. I mean, I heard one finance ministry official saying, no, we'll take nominal GDP. Nominal GDP, current prices. All right, in that case, will you also take the dollar as it goes on depreciating? I mean, the rupee as it goes on depreciating? It's now 100. When the Prime Minister said this, it was only 65 rupees a dollar. Today it is 100. So the numbers are becoming even more huge. So I think, it's time people of like your association to sit down and advise the government. I've written letters to the PM. I am, in fact, a student of two of the greatest economists of the 20th century, Simon Kuznets, who invented the GDP, and Paul Samuelson, with whom I wrote a joint paper on index numbers, which is vital for making estimates of and growth rate estimates. So I know these subjects inside out. And I think that, we will become a laughing stock if we go on claiming we'll get 5 trillion, 5 trillion, 5 trillion. And we have to now say we have to turn it around and go forward. So now, also we had a target, which is now forgotten, that we will double agricultural output in 4 years. And that would mean 18% per year. Agriculture is nowhere near 18%. This is not even 4%. So these estimates should not be loosely used. And I hope your association and other leaders tell me what is the practical way out. Having a good goal is good part of our reflection, but reflection is not enough. You must know the actual thought process by which you will achieve it. And so I'll come to that. Now, for instance, tomorrow you want to put a target. You must understand what that target is for. I'll say that the Chinese have a GDP which is something like 10 or 11 trillion dollars. But then the Chinese also, there's a lot of problems there. Their rate of exchange is artificially fixed at 6 yuan to a dollar. In my opinion, also, if you looked at what is called as the purchasing power parity, that is, you look at the price of a commodity which is in India, produced in India, and the same commodity produced in the United States, and see what the price ratio is. So if I take a haircut, a really good haircut today will maybe cost you 2,000 rupees, if I'm not wrong. In the United States, you can't get an haircut less than $150, a decent haircut. Now you multiply that by 100, that means 15,000. So a haircut which is the same in both countries in quality is worth 2,000 rupees in India, but 15,000 in the United States. So if you multiply American product with the American prices, you'll get an inflated figure. The same thing with the Chinese. So what we have to understand is that today we should use the purchasing power parity. That is the ratio of prices of in America of the commodities divided by the prices of India. That gives you an accurate way of evaluating the output in India. According to me, today India is the third largest GDP in the world using purchasing power parity, which is the United Nations acceptable way, which is the way which Simon Kuznets said so, and this is the way with both Samuelson and Swamy in their joint paper said so. So hence we have a situation where we have to understand that when you give this target, please say that this is an PPP rate. PP rate will not have a change if the exchange rate changes. Our exchange rate has been going on changing, and it's become 100 rupees now. So you can't use that. So if you use the currency exchange rate, the market, for evaluating a GDP, then you will get in 2019, when the rate was 65 rupees a dollar, the GDP will be 6th or 7th in the world. And this has been used. In fact, I corrected Mr. Venkatesha Naidu, Vice President, when as chairman of the Rajya Sabha, he said, we have now become the 6th largest GDP in the world. I said, no, we are third largest for some time. He says, no, I mean, I've been given this number by the bureaucrats. So please understand, when you are comparing GDPs, you must use what is called as a purchasing power parity. And that would mean that the exchange rate you should use today should be not more than 30 rupees a dollar. And 30 rupees a dollar is what you will get if you take the average of all price ratios of all commodities, not 100 rupees. And that makes a big difference. And then secondly, you have to make sure that you use it not in current prices, because inflation comes, then GDP will go up anyway. That has no meaning. And therefore, nominal is something which is very bad. And I'm surprised that a finance ministry official has said that publicly. So we come to this question, how do I accelerate my growth rate? India is not a country which is now like an African country which is starting from scratch. It was the most developed country for thousands of years, till 1730. It's only after the continuous bleeding from 1200 AD to 1730 AD that India became much, much lower in international connections, and the Chinese went ahead of us. But after the British, we became one of the poorest countries, and so did the Chinese. So, therefore, India has been a developed country. It can be again a developed country without difficulty. There's a big difference. Why are we so good in software? Because we have developed brains for centuries. And now you tell our people do it. We have artificial intelligence. Everybody now says in America that the best language to store knowledge in artificial intelligence and a computer is Sanskrit. And Sanskrit develops your brain. There's a school, which if you go to Google, it will tell you St. James School in London, which compulsorily requires all students in the morning for about 30 minutes to recite Sanskrit shlokas. And he has gone on record, it's there in Google, that Sanskrit, reciting Sanskrit shlokas will mean brain development will be much better. Now, we have all this wealth, and if you have that self-confidence, you can do it. Now, how do you really turn this? The economic theory tells you more capital and more labor does not produce increasing growth rates. Because more capital, more labor you put, then the law of diminishing starts working. The returns from additional capital, additional labor goes on contracting. So what did we find in the past? Britain suddenly went not from along a curve, growth curve. It went from a curve to another curve to another curve. Why? Because they have brought in steam engines. They brought in Bessemer steel blast furnace. So those two transformed. These are called innovations. United States went ahead because of wireless, and then after that, they went into a number of innovations. They went into finally in internet. Internet is a contribution of America. And these all raised the productivity of both capital and labor. So innovation is extremely important. India must today is giving woefully small amounts for research and development. We should at least give 3 to 4% of our GDP, not 0.5% and 0.75% of GDP for research and development, and motivate people and not have bosses sitting in the head of those institutions trying to steal that or plagiarize their research, but project these people. We have, on space, we are today amongst the number one. The satellites we produce for launching, they are the cheapest in the world. Our rockets were also cheapest till there was a sabotage attack by the foreign intelligence agencies, which destroyed many of our scientists in ISRO. But now we have recovered. We are now being, we nearly landed in the moon. There was a small glitch, but I think we are about to do it very soon. We are progressing in that area. And both men and women are contributing in ISRO. If you go, you'll see probably almost 50% of the scientists are women. So innovation is key. According to econometric analysis, in the question of growth, when you decide a portion, how much is the share, you will find that countries like Japan, which grew very fast, countries like United States, which grew very fast, all of them, almost 50% of the growth was due to new innovations and not due to more capital and more labor. So instead of moving along a curve, you jump from curves to curves because you're getting innovations to do it. What should India do today? It should now has a unique opportunity in energy. For instance, we have the world's largest deposit of thorium. And these are available as monazites in the sands of Tamil Nadu and Kerala. And uranium is exhausting. By 2050, they say there will be no uranium. America has already started. In fact, they're smuggling our sand. I used to see in a newspaper, so-and-so has been arrested for sand smuggling. I say, what madcap is he? I mean, who would want to smuggle sand, which is available everywhere in the world? But that Indian sand in Tamil Nadu coast and Kerala had monazite, which are thorium. And thorium, Baba tried, and then our former Prime Minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh, stopped it after this Indo-US atomic deal. He had actually worked out a way by which thorium can be converted into U-233 and then into fissile uranium, as well as for reactor purposes to generate electricity. So we have 60% of it. We should do it. Desalination of seawater. Tamil Nadu and Karnataka fighting for water. Why? They say, no, the Kaveri doesn't have enough water. But your ocean, you can convert that into drinking water by desalination of seawater. Israel has no river at all. But in Israel, you can go and see every household's tap has running water, filtered, beautifully filtered water, 24 hours a day. Even in India, there are two places where desalination sea plants have been used. One is the atomic energy colony in Kalpakam in Tamil Nadu coast, which has the municipality said will not give you enough water. So they set up a desalination plant, and they are the only place in Tamil Nadu, I think, where you get 24 hours a day, you get water in their taps at the homes of the scientists. Then in Jamnagar, there was a refinery being set up by the Ambanis, and Jamnagar. And the Jamnagar municipality said the water you want, we can't give. So they set up a desalination plant. And today, Jamnagar Ambani plant supplies water to the Dwarka municipality instead of wanting water from them. So water is another. We have rivers which are all the time short in supply, like the Kaveri, Vaigai, and but we have rivers which go into the ocean mostly. Godavari, Krishna, 46 rivers of Kerala, 96% they go into this ocean. So we must know how to conserve water. Must build water grids to transfer surplus water to shortage water, deficit thing. So this is another. Then you have another magnificent capacity. You can do agriculture 12 months of the year, because the water is available, the sun is available, and so on. In America, you can't do it for 5 months because there is snow. Europe, same thing. China, a good part of it is also 3 months. You can't do, but in India, you can grow 3 crops. Are we growing 3 crops? No. Only in 20% of the 20 or 25% of the land, we are growing more than 1 crop. We should be able to grow 3 crops a year. Look at the amount of production we'll get. You have something like 50 million cows in our country, and we are not producing enough water, enough milk. But Israel produces, each cow on the average produces only 200 liters per year, whereas the Israeli cow produces 11,000 liters. Imagine that if Indian cows were well fed and looked after in gaushalas and all that, and they started giving milk, we will have so much milk, we won't know what to do with it. Already our milk prices are lowest in the world. Agricultural products are also the lowest in the world. So therefore, make agriculture as a exporting sector and utilize it. Use fertilizer, use pesticides. By Green Revolution meant what? Only 10%. Lal Bahadur Shastri brought in a package and gave to 10% of the farmers, and we became self-sufficient in just 10 years. Today we can feed the whole world. But that is what So what I think is, when you reflect, you must think in terms of India becoming a world economic power. We are today third position in GDP, and it will be, we must try first overtake China. It can be done in 10 years. I've studied China very closely, and I've written many books on it. And there is nothing that China has we don't have. It's just a question of motivation and the right economics to be applied. And then you must challenge America. Who can challenge America? Only that country which can innovate better than them. And today the Americans are relying so much on Indian scientists. What is there is an indication. They know we are in a position we are very intelligent people with proper education. We will, innovate, ahead of everybody else. And innovation is the key. It's, as I told you, at least 50% of the growth rate is of fast developing countries is ascribable to innovation. So I would say this is the thing. Instead of, giving spin and being spineless, the advisors to the Prime Minister should go and tell him frankly that we need to grow faster, and these are the ways to do it. And don't leave him the lurch. I don't think anybody in the finance ministry is able to do that. But you people who are experts in the university, they must have the nerve to tell him this way won't do. And if you do that, if we get people who do not spin and are not spineless, but are people with spine and with courage to say what they think is correct, I'm sure that this country will become a developed country. It will certainly can cross 10% growth rate. It can even cross 14% growth rate for a short period. And we can become the world's from third largest at present to second largest. And from second largest, we can even challenge the United States. We have the youngest population in the world. Average age of an Indian today is 26. Average age of Chinese is 35. Average age of America is 37. Average age of the British is 45. And the Japanese is 50. They are aging populations. They're all having problems because they are not able to generate enough funds for their post-retirement funds, which they give in liberally. So India has got this huge, educate them. I think education should get at least 6%, not this 2.5% presently, 6% of the GDP as investment. And we should reward people who are willing to do research and development. That is the way of not only thought, because I've given you the mechanism by which you can do it, but also reflection, that you have a heritage which you have to recover, and that heritage is something that we owe to the future generations of India. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak.
So, good evening, everybody. I must confess that I'm doubly disadvantaged. One, that I have to speak after Dr. Swamy speaks, that too on economics. It's a tall order to speak after such a broad view about the way forward to make India a $5 trillion economy. Thoughts and reflections. I think it was a brilliant presentation by Dr. Swamy. And second thing, I believe that probably the fag end of the day, the second day, I think, of the conference, or probably the last section of the conference, I think I'm doubly disadvantaged to speak as a speaker at the fag end. So it's going to be a challenge of several sorts before me. So as I go into the subject proper, the only thing that I was trying to tell you is that I will take off from where Dr. Swamy left and probably add a few more thoughts into how do we go about achieving this 5 trillion goal. First and foremost, we must understand that 5 trillion is probably a synonym, or a euphemism or a physiology to become an economic superpower. Yeah, we are an economic superpower, as Dr. Swamy pointed out. We are one of the biggest economies in the world. We are one of the largest economies in the world, no doubt about it. But But are we recognized as one, especially in terms of per capita? 130 billion people, half of them are males, and half of them go for a haircut. That would add to the GDP. But does that really mean that we are an economic superpower? That's the question. So we are a superpower in more ways than one. We are traditionally a superpower. If you look at Angus Madison, who has chronicled the economic history of the last 2000 years, he points out that India has been an economic superpower since the birth of Christ till, say, early 19th century. So barring 19th century and 20th century, where India has been a very poor performer because of a variety of reasons, and the most important one was the British rule. And the British rule ended up with looting around $45 trillion of Indian wealth. That's not a small number. $1 trillion is something like 75 lakh crores. So you can multiply and get your own numbers as to how British looted us for $45 trillion. And that is the latest computations that people are able to come out with. And $45 trillion of wealth being looted by the British ensured that India, which was one of the topmost performers of the world as a country in terms of GDP at the relevant point in time, has now become a laggard. At least in our view, India is not a great economic superpower currently. In fact, my views on the subject were almost similar till I heard Shri Gurmurthy, one of the best known chartered accountants of this country, who has spoken in a seminar in IIT, and he brings out it's a must-see video for all of us, where he points out that again, based on Madison papers and several other documented statisticians who have brought out in various publications, that how India was one of the best performers in the global economy. That's still the 19th century, and then the British Raj, and then we are back to where we are. We were at around, global share was around 25 to 33% of the GDP. Today it is around 4% of the global GDP. So currently we are at $3 trillion, and the Prime Minister has rightly fixed it at 5 trillion for within the next 5 years. So as Dr. Swamy points out, from 3 trillion to 5 trillion, whether it happens in the next 5 years, for 5 years we have to grow at 14%, whether 14% is possible, whether, especially given the fact that we clocked 3.1% in the fourth quarter of 1920, just before the lockdown. So all these are questions on which I don't want to dwell in, because Dr. Swamy has dealt elaborately on that. But if you want to take $5 trillion as a benchmark, from $3 trillion, which is around 2 lakh crores, 2 lakh crores at 75 rupees to $1 roughly gives you $3 trillion. Now, if you want to jump to 5 trillion, if your dollar goes from 75 to say 40, and 2 lakh crores divided by 40 will give you 5 trillion. So one way of looking at it is that you juggle with the dollar rate, and here presto, within no time, through an accounting jugglery, through a rate jugglery, you are at 5 trillion. Is that what we want? Obviously, no. We don't want financial jugglery. We don't want book entries. We don't want to window dress our balance sheet, collective balance sheet. We want to do it the hard way, namely produce goods and services. Other things remaining as it is. If the dollar remains constant and the value and the inflation remains constant, everything being fixed as it is, the value of goods and services as a whole should increase from $3 trillion to $5 trillion, or better, I would say, in Indian rupees, it should go from 2 lakh crores to 3.5 lakh crores in the next 5 years. That's the target. So if that to happen, we have to understand it is not emergence of India, it is re-emergence of India. In fact, several people talk about an Asian century. Several people talk about 21st century being that of Asia century, most notably of China and India. To me, I think it will be that of India, especially as we progress beyond 2025. It will be an Indian century. But if we have to make 5 trillion, 5 trillion, let us understand, is basically not our destination. It is our earliest destination expressed in a very simple language. But the real destination would be that we emerge as some sort of an economic powerhouse, wherein we deal with the scourge of poverty within our lifetimes. We do away with poverty, we do away with malnutrition, we do away with illiteracy, we do away with many of the ills that are plaguing our system. And we are doing it quite confidently. Today, if you look at it, the way in which we have tackled COVID, who would have thought 1 year back that India would be supplying COVID to even some of the developed countries? And that's what we are capable of, and that's what we are doing. But, you know, in every time I get disillusioned, or every time personally I feel low, all of us do that, undergo this cyclical way of psychological behavior. At that time, I opened Sundarakandam, and where Lord Hanuman is supposed to have gone up to the end, and Jambavan is supposed to have told him how powerful he was and how he could jump. All Indians require a dose of Sundarakandam, and we need to realize our potential. We need to understand our potential. We need to be reminded of our potential every now and then. I think that the nation also, COVID has come as a very good boon. I would say that COVID has made us believe, or self-believe, that we are an emerging superpower. We are the best in the world in certain aspects. We are doing excellently well, and this entire way of handling the COVID and bringing out a vaccine and sending it to the world is one of the tribute to our genius. So as Swamy, Dr. Swamy rightly pointed out, the thoughts and reflections. Now, thoughts, he explained it as an abstract way of what he wants and how he wants to go about it, and reflection is how to go about it, and he brilliantly explained it. Now the question is, for going from 3 trillion to 5 trillion, the most important thing that you require, and why people are bullish about India, is that India's savings rate is at 30%. Now, we are a 3 trillion economy with a 30% savings rate, which means roughly our savings will be around 900 billion or $1 trillion. That's again a number by itself. Now, this savings comes to the financial market, and from financial market, it goes into investment market, and from investment market, it goes to production, and from production to consumption. In fact, I teach economics like this to my students. Economics is very simple. You require production, you require consumption. The difference of the two must lead to savings. You cannot be producing everything and consuming everything. You have to produce, and there must be a consumption which is below production, and hence it must lead to savings. Savings must lead to investment. Investment must lead to production all over again. So the whole chain goes up and comes down like a giant piston. Now here, India is blessed that we have got a domestic saving of 30%. It is the most unspoken strength of India. We always talk about FDI. Oh, FDI in this sector is opened up. Oh, that FDI has come in. In the best of years, which was the last year, or rather the current year, 2021, we might have received an FDI of $65 billion, which in a $3 trillion economy is just 2%. Whereas our domestic savings is 30%. And there is a document in the finance ministry, in the Ministry of Statistics, authored by no less than C. Rangarajan, former governor of RBI, which points out that India will not be relying on foreign capital for a foreseeable future. But what do? We say we have to adopt IFRS because we need to get FDI. Now, I will come to that portion later, but I'm just flagging off as to if really we want to become a superpower. It is not only Mr. Modi or his government or his cabinet members talk about a $5 trillion economy. It is important that all professionals, every Indian, an Indian who probably would be vending the classical cliche of a tea in an earthen pot, a small earthenware, or somebody who could be making textiles, or who could be making automobiles, or who could be writing software programs. Each one of us have to behave like a citizen of a $5 trillion economy. It is no game saying that India will become a $5 trillion economy and we will be cribbing about, and most of the time we do this, and fairly well, as to how a government is not extending credit on 17.5. Now that is a very important aspect for the sector, no doubt about it. But if as a nation we need to grow, the government has also to give up the pettiness in its thought process in various issues, and it has to move to a much larger vision, which is commensurate with the genius of these people. I'll just come to this rightly in a few seconds, but first let me finish this cycle of production, consumption, savings and investment. Now this fuel of 30% makes India a capital, domestic capital dependent economy. That is why whenever foreign issues happen, like the dollar was degraded and the Standard and Poor actually brought down the rating of the dollar from AAA to AA plus. Many people said, this is a crisis. And in fact, the then Finance Minister Pranab Mukherjee was very eloquent. He said, we are in a crisis, but we will manage. Now, if we are in a crisis, we have a problem, we will manage. These are all good semantics, but how do we do it? And what is the basis for this? Pranab Mukherjee was not a person who used to speak just like that. He was known to have some very great views about Indian economy. And one of the fundamental reasons why we are a saving economy is we are a family culture. We are a family dependent culture. And once we are a family dependent culture, we will always be a savings economy. And the moment we are a savings economy, we save, and this savings becomes the fuel for the future investment. So this is a very big point that I'm making. India will, for the next foreseeable future, be a family-driven society, hence a savings-driven economy. But we are a savings-driven economy to the extent of around 32%. In fact, the last 30 years, if you take, I don't take any statistics of 2021 into consideration because of COVID, forget it. Last 30 years, in fact, when the liberalization started, when malls came in, when customs duties were cut, when tax rates were brought down, India actually started savings more. It is a paradox. In fact, we have more malls than what it was in 1991. In 1991, our savings rate was anywhere between 11 to 13%, 11 to 14%. We have virtually doubled. We have more cars in the road, but our savings rate has also increased. There are more computers, more cell phones, more gadgets, more cents. In fact, the biggest thing that a South Indian could have is a visit of his cousin from Dubai for his holiday, would carry on something or the other, which you would be looking at all during our college days. But today you have everything available in India, but our savings rate has also gone up. Now, this is a paradox which nobody is able to explain, except for the fact that today our savings rate has gone up primarily because we are a family-oriented society. This is that the society, the structure of the society is family-oriented, and that makes India a savings economy. Where you take America, for instance, or the Western world, the savings rate are pathetic. They have savings rate of 3%, 2%, sometimes even in the negative. America's savings rate is by and large negative. And amongst it, whosoever saves are again the Indian, Chinese, and the Hispanics. And they are the people who are saving in America. The traditional American, the white American may save marginally. The black American does not save, and he has no family at all. In fact, if there is one group in America which has no family affiliation and children born out of wedlocks, not within wedlocks, out of wedlock, it is a black American. Now, this is creating a huge imbalance within the American economy, and their savings is going down. But we are 32% saving, 28%, some years 30%. On an average, we are saving now at around 30%. Whereas China is around 45-50%. The problem is that China is saving so much that Ben Bernanke, the former US Federal Reserve Chairman, said that there is a savings glut. We have heard of tomato glut, we have heard of potato glut when potato prices come down or tomato prices come down. Ben Bernanke was very clear. He said because Chinese are saving so much, they are pushing their savings to the outside world, and that is creating a problem. So how does it work? Let me explain to you. America is dependent on Chinese goods. China exports to Americans. Americans give the money to China. China saves, which means they put the money into the US Federal Reserve System and buy the US bond and keep it in their locker. So China funds America's buying and also their savings. So America is so happy with China, and China is so happy with America because otherwise nobody will give work to the Chinese. So it is like two drunkards walking in a road, and America and China are counterbalancing each other. But if one falls, the other will definitely fall. So this is the problem for the Chinese. Chinese savings is very high. China has no domestic consumption. So China is dependent on the global consumption, and the global consumption by and large comes from the American consumption. On the other hand, America is not producing enough for itself. It is dependent on global production, and of which substantial portion comes from the Chinese production. So America and China are counterbalancing each other. When compared to America, we are definitely a genuinely savings economy. But when compared to China, we are a consumption economy. We have Pongal, we have Makara Sankranti, we have Diwali, we have Holi. Next month is Holi, or next week, sorry. Next week we have Holi. Once Holi crosses, then we have next month we have Tamil New Year's Day. You have local you have Marathi New Year's Day. We have Kannada New Year's Day. We celebrate that. Probably May is the only month we don't celebrate any great festival, except of course Buddha Purnima and something like that. May is the only dry month, and rightly so. If the weather is oppressive, we don't do anything. Again, once June starts, we will have something or the other flowing until we have Diwali, and probably up to Christmas. We just go on happily enjoying, which means it is basically micro triggers for expenditure. It's a Diwali means you have to go and buy something, crackers, sweets. Whether you are a diabetic or not, that's not my problem, but you have to buy sweets, you have to buy new clothes, you have to go and meet people. If there's a wedding out there, you have to go there, your friend's wedding, you definitely have to go train, bus, whether there is a plane or whether there is some other modes of transport, whether there's Band, whether there is COVID, God knows what it is, but yet you make it. Now, why these are things that is not happening in China? China has no culture. It has completely demolished it because of the communist theories. And they have said, we will have nothing to do with the past. We will have nothing to do with our past. And the only known intellectual for us is Deng and Mao. And beyond that, there is hardly anybody. And we have completely obliterated our past. Since that has happened, China doesn't know celebration, and the only celebration it has is in the month of February and March, where they celebrate this Chinese or January end or February first week, they have this Chinese New Year. And this Chinese New Year festival is the only festival that they celebrate. And the next function is in the next year, which is the traditional Chinese New Year. So China doesn't know how to spend. America doesn't know how to save. And this is where the Indian model comes in, where it balances. And it balances brilliantly between consumption on one hand, because thanks to festivals, thanks to so much of cultural pressures, if there is a daughter's wedding, you spend. If it's a son's wedding, you spend. If it is going to be Diwali, you spend. If it is Makara Sankranti, you spend. If it is Pongal, you spend. And you also save, because the culture of this land is that you have to always have restraints. The restraints of everybody compels you to save. The restraint, which is what is embedded in every single Indian, ensures that we are a 30% savings economy. Our domestic consumption is very high at around 60%. And that what makes India a truly working model for a sustainable model for the next hundreds of years. And what makes India a great country or a great economic model is what I would now dwell, and I would take you into this. I will also try to highlight one or two pitfalls that we may have, and with that I will close. I just need another 10-15 minutes. With that I will close. First, let me take the pitfalls. All this is not automatic. Much as it looks so very simple and sweet, the real fact is converting savings into investment, investment into production, production into consumption is all having its own pain points. It is not seamless. And that is why we have invented economic theories, whether it's currency theory, monetary policy, or fiscal policy, taxation here, taxation there. We have a whole range of laws to ensure these policies are effectuated. It's not so simple. It's not automatic. Where is it that India is getting into a pain point? The pain points, in my view, are threefold. One, there is a judicial reform which is necessary. One, with administrative reform which is necessary. And the third one is regulatory reform, which nobody talks about. People talk about only two reforms, reforms of judiciary and reforms of administration. But there is a third eye or the third leg in the whole thing, and which is the reforms of the regulator. Today, SEBI, RBI, PFRDA, including ICAI, have a lot to be decided in terms of delivering on what they are supposed to do in terms of the requirement of a $5 trillion economy. If you want to be like the Calcutta tram, just to go along in your own beaten path and track, I see no problem in this. But if you want to escalate from what you are from a $3 trillion to $5 trillion in the next 5 years, we can't be having, for instance, RBI talking about a 90-day delinquency norm. And 90-day delinquency norm for NPA may be suitable to the Western countries, and there are several countries which have rejected it, and there are several countries which do not want this 90-day norm. Of course, many countries have accepted this 90-day norm. But if we have to move forward, we cannot be declaring the entire country to be filled with NPAs and say that we will become an Atmanirbhar Bharat or a $5 trillion economy. We can't be doing this. We can't be having judiciary which probably after 10 years, in fact, I was just listening to Justice Anita Sumant talking about Bitcoins and cryptocurrencies in the last leg of our interventions in the previous session. I think 10 years later, RBI has discovered there is something called cryptocurrency, and of which Bitcoin is one of them. They used cryptocurrency and Bitcoin as if they are alternatives. After 10 years, we have realized this much. And till now, we don't even have an accounting standard. Should we have an accounting standard on Bitcoins? As a practitioner of FEMA, I am appalled that how can you hold Bitcoin as a currency? It can be anything but a currency. Currency is one which is issued by a sovereign country. Currency cannot be issued or mined from a program in a computer, and we can't call it a currency. You can call it anything else. You may say it's a lottery ticket. You may call it something else. But I would say it is not equivalent to currency as per the definition of FEMA. So you have to figure out how do we move forward in terms of judicial reforms, how do we move forward in terms of your regulatory reforms. You have to also have administration reforms. These three factors are very crucial in determining our way forward. Now, what is that which will trigger India to grow from whatever she is at 3 trillion to 5 trillion? I think Dr. Swamy put it very succinctly. I think we should, and he speaks about this in personal conversation and also in several public meetings he has spoken about. And I think we should emulate this model that he has been championing for a very long time. What is this? See, again, we are all accountants. We understand numbers better. So I will, instead of going through the economic theory, I'll put it in numbers. Our savings rate is around 30%. We have an incremental capital output ratio. That is, to produce 1% growth, we require 4 units of capital. So 30% divided by 4, on an average, we are growing at 7.5%. This is the model. So 30% divided by 4, 7.5. Now, if 30% has to go up to 10%, the capital incremental output ratio must go up from 4 to 3. That means with less of capital, we must be able to produce more. This is called the productivity or the innovative or the invention, whatever you call it, that must set in and kick in a larger return for the equivalent amount of capital. Again, I repeat that the capital that we are putting in today gets roughly 4 units of capital, fetches 1 unit of growth, one unit of output. So if you want to have more growth, you can either increase savings or you can increase the capital output ratio. If you increase savings, say from 35 to 30%, which is there currently, to say 45%, it will badly hit the domestic savings, domestic consumption. If domestic consumption is hit, domestic revenues will be hit, government's programs will be hit, government's welfare measures will be hit. So it is something that we cannot actually work it out. So we need to look at the denominator. What the denominator says, from 4 to 3, we have to take this quantum leap. Now, how do we take this quantum leap? Now, to answer that, I will take last 5 minutes and throw it open to question answers, if any. Now, are we going to achieve a $5 trillion economy with government still holding Air India? I'm giving a very simple question. Now, if Air India is still to be held by government, All India Radio is still to be held by the government, Doordarshan is still to be held by the government, BSNL is still to be held by the government, I think 5 trillion is still possible, not by 2025, probably by 2030. So we have to understand, if we have to quickly move up the ladder, what we require is a celebration of private entrepreneurship, celebrate the onset of the Indian entrepreneur. This is what Prime Minister was alluding to in the speech, probably in the motion of thanks to the President. For too long, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, Hindi movies, Tamil movies, Kannada movies, you take any movie, the villain was invariably a rich man who would have broken law, because he could not have become rich unless he broke a law. Our mindset is still that because of a socialist era. We need to celebrate wealth. We need to believe that the wealthy people alone will make India wealthy. India cannot be a wealthy country with poor people. India can be a wealthy country only with wealthy people. And as Comrade Deng said, that it is glorious to be rich. That was the words he used. I think we need for somebody, either the president of this country, the prime minister of the country, the opposition leader, or many of the chief ministers, they have to come forward and say, it is glorious to be rich. The rich and prosperity must be celebrated. We need to say that, yes, India will be a prosperous nation only when its people, when its citizens are all prosperous. Now, for that to happen, I think we need to understand that we cannot be doing this yojanas after yojanas after yojanas by the central government or the state government. We cannot be a welfare state, and nowhere in the world has a welfare state become an economic superpower. If it may suit the politicians of the day, including the present central government headed by Narendra Modi ji, that a welfareist program may help them politically. But does it help economically? I would suggest it doesn't. India has to move away from this obnoxious idea that you have a yojana here, you have a yojana there, you have a yojana for this, you have a yojana for that. All yojanas, in my view, are nothing but bojanas. We have to come and move away from all these yojanas, and we have to also make two distinct changes, fundamental changes to our constitution. The preamble must do away with the word socialism. The fundamental rights in Part 3 of the Constitution must also give way to fundamental duties in our Constitution. The fundamental rights is basically an idea that flows from Thomas Hobbes, from Thomas Paine, and various other Western thinkers who believe that every individual is primarily bad. To contain them, you require an omnipotent, omnipresent government. But omnipotent, omnipresent government should not be a tyrannical government, which is what they felt was there in the 16th century and the 17th century. And to rein in the powers of the government, they thought about a government which will have omnipotent powers, but with a tacit understanding that every citizen will have a fundamental right. But we believe that every soul is potentially divine. That is what Swami Vivekananda says. And to counterbalance this, we believe in Karmanyeva Adhikarasya. A country which, as a person, as a society, across denominations, across castes, across regions, everybody will understand this sloka from Mahabharata, especially Bhagavad Gita, the Karmanyeva Adhikarasya. Everybody believes that I am the master of my own duty. But when it comes to the Constitution, we believe in our fundamental right. A fundamental right-driven constitution and a society which is driven by fundamental duty needs to reconcile itself, arrive at the sweet spot, arrive at a definitive balance, and that would pave way to ensure that the citizens' rights are counterbalanced by their own duties. And once the citizens' duties are put in place, I am sure why 5 trillion? A 10 trillion target is easily achievable. A 5 trillion target cannot be the government's sole prerogative. It cannot be the government's sole responsibility. A 5 trillion target must be every Indian's responsibility. If it is every Indian's responsibility, it must be every Indian's duty. If it is every Indian's duty, it must be put to practice, not only by the government of the day, whether it's the state, center, I don't care. But it must be put into practice by all of us, every institution, every individual, every citizen. And unless that feeling doesn't come in, it is very impossible. We will still achieve 5 trillion because we were a superpower, economic superpower, as I told you, up to 1800s and probably up to 1820. We will continue to be a superpower, but we will not be a superpower with an Indian model. The question, therefore, is, the reflection point is whether we will be an Indian superpower with a Western model or whether we will be an economic superpower with a new Indian model that will lay emphasis on duties, that will lay emphasis on your own strengths, on your own inventions, on your own leverages, and on your own strengths. And are we prepared for that? Will every citizen be emboldened, will be given an opportunity? That is the challenge. The how part of it is still not yet clear. The how part of it is still in a cryptic Atmanirbhar. I would like to see the Atmanirbhar slogan, expounded by somebody in the government, and tell us as to how we can move forward. And for that, we cannot be nitpicking on every single decision of the Supreme Court or the High Court and amending our law retrospectively. All these must change, and we must truly behave. The government must behave, the institutions must behave, the citizens must behave like a citizen of a $5 trillion economy. Are we prepared? I would say yes, we are prepared. But the biggest bugbear, as I said, comes from the 3 reforms that we have not yet touched about. And once we do that, we are on road not only to 5 trillion, which will be our first pit stop. I think 10 trillion and 15 trillion would all come within no time. I would thank KSEA for a wonderful opportunity. And I would like to thank all the office bearers, some of whom did call me several times and persuaded me to participate here. KSE is some sort of a home for me. It's a homecoming for me. And I should thank you all, because it's rarely do I get an opportunity to prepare myself for a lecture on economics to chartered accountants. And I will tell you one thing, India's $5 trillion or $10 trillion goal cannot be possible till chartered accountants play a role of economist in this country. It is no longer to say that GST audit chala gaya. GST audit or no GST audit, the country's economics are unaudited. And if you can take up the role of auditing and guiding the government's finances, and as Dr. Swamy was alluding to, tell how the government should actually course correct itself and reach the target sooner than later, I think you would be doing a greater service than anything else that you are doing. With this, I will stop. And if there are questions, I would like to answer. Thank you very much once again.
So thank you for a wonderful lecture, this session. There are a couple of questions which have come on the way. The first one is an obsessed on GST. There's the first question which goes, is GST a booster for economic growth or a bane?
To tell you very bluntly, I have written this to the finance minister in 2016 and I had given an interview. At that time, if you recall, Narendra Modi Saab came out with a slogan that there was tax terrorism and his government would do away with tax terrorism. My answer to that was, yes, tax terrorism is gone. Tax jihadism is coming in form of GST. I would strongly believe that GST has been causing too much of pain. And one practitioner told me that somewhere around close to 1,000 amendments in the last 1,200 working days since GST was coming. I may be wrong here and there. My apologies about it. But if you are, after 30 years of struggle, we get a law and it is so unstable that we want to tinker with it every day. And that is the problem. And as the previous session speaker was also pointing out with Justice Anita Suman, that we are trying to block input credit somehow or the other. I think you straight away say no input credit. That would be far better than say that the neighbor, you have to do the blood count of the neighbor. Unless you don't do the blood count of the neighbor, and if it is not all right, you will not get input credit. If your neighbor is suffering from diabetes, no input credit. If your neighbor is 5 foot 6 inches, no input credit. What is this? In fact, people must read Kelkar committee report several times over as to how they thought about a seamless input tax credit that should flow. In fact, he went on to say even the credit must go to stamp duties and petroleum products and other things. Unfortunately, we have got an animal which has a head of a cow, body of a man, and legs of an elephant. That is what GST is all about today. Unless we reform it, I'm sorry to say, it will not help us in our destination of $5 trillion economy.
We'll go to the next question, sir. You were mentioning that China does not know how to spend except they spend only for their new year, but they are spending heavily on infrastructure. Can you please clarify?
Yeah, what China does is, in our place, we will have one airport, one gate, 17 aeroplanes, and 10,000 people. China is exactly the opposite. It will have 17 airports, one plane. Because it has created cities, it has created infrastructure, because there is nowhere it can actually consume. So China's economic boom is primarily investment driven. People save. People save in China because they are still a family oriented economy. But they are not able to consume because they don't have a culture. Unlike India, where there is a culture of spending, this is what you cannot force a man to spend. In India, supposing tomorrow something happens to me also, for next 13 days, there will be function in my house to actually observe that I have died. And then there will be something more after 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. You go on triggering all these things. Even after you die, you contribute to the GDP of this country. You go to a temple, you can't go empty-handed. You have to go with some fruit, flower. You visit somebody, you have to go with, you can't go empty-handed. That means everywhere there is a micro trigger. That is why India will not have a recession. India's recession last 2 quarters was triggered basically by COVID. But once the COVID stopped, the festival season came, everybody went to shop and did not mind that you have to keep the safe distancing, mask and all were thrown out. We went and happily shopped for Diwali and Pongal and every other thing. Point here is, it's a very important point. China does not have this luxury. So it is dependent on others for spending. That is why China is going on exporting. Something or the other, it is going on exporting because it is able to manufacture, but it is not able to consume. Whereas we are able to consume it. That is our beauty. Our production, our consumption are going together.
So since it's the last session, I hope we have the liberty to extend the time by 5-10 minutes. We have 2 more.
I have no issues. I hope you are not bored.
No, sir. This is a virtual session, or else people would have been clapping for your answer on GST. The third question is: don't you think we need a change the structure of GDP metrics before growing our economy to 5 trillion to be able to achieve the inclusive growth?
See, GDP, as Dr. Swamy pointed out, is calculated by the Kuznets model, and people like this Lord John Maynard Keynes and others brought about this broad idea of GDP. It is well structured. So you can say that Bhutan is using a new index called Gross Domestic Happiness, GDH. See, all this is okay for argument's sake. We can say I want to have happiness, I want to have pleasure, I want to relax. All these things is okay for 3 hours. Okay, next meal when it comes, you realize the importance of your work, the importance of going. That is why we give equal weightage to work. That is why it is karmanyavadikarasya. You have to work. In fact, God says also in our philosophy, in this land's philosophy, is you better work. God is not saying that you pray and I will give you everything. No, He says you do your work. And I will give you whatever I have to give, like what the institute gives when we all wrote our final exam. So you have to do your preparation, write your things well. You may pass, you may not pass. That is not in your hands. But you have to do your duty. So the point here is we are structurally, we are a material economy. That is why it was called Arthashastra. Arthashastra is the right word. In Sanskrit, in Kannada, also I think in Hindi, all these, the language, the typical word for economics is Arthashastra, which means material science, science of materials. So unless you consume, unless you produce, all of us become sannyasi, then what will happen? World will come to an end in 30 years, which can't afford. So our weightage for Shringaras, weightage for consumption, weightage for production must be there. We always must do that.
So the next question is: are you hopeful that economic agenda will become a priority over political agenda? I think this question is more about political economy.
Yeah. I would suggest yes. That is what Prime Minister Narendra Modi is striving and trying to shift away from politics of caste, community, religion, and all the fault lines that we have as a country to a larger development agenda where everybody will be forced to talk about agenda and of development, agenda of growth. And when growth happens, it has to be growth for everybody, growth for inclusive model. So there will be a tectonic shift from whether your caste is better or my caste is better to your development model versus my development model, your growth model versus my growth model, whether I can give you much better growth, whether I can give you much better GDP, whether I can give you much better per capita income of to every average Indian. That is what I would look forward, and that is how I will go ahead and look at it. This shift will happen. Believe me, the next 15-20 years. It's not an ordinary shift being attempted. It will take time. Sometimes I also get very frustrated with Prime Minister Modi and his own party. But having said that, I know that the destination point is the correct one. We must also take a long-term view. Here is a person who is trying to shift the narrative in this country, and I think this will take time, but we need to back him.
Yeah, the next question is on how people whose working life is ending to survive with such low returns on investment, mainly the interest rate.
This is a very big challenge in our country, especially whenever I meet my father. So you don't have to remind me. My father is around 84 years old. He constantly reminds me that the interest rates are falling. Not only are the interest rates falling, he has to pay tax on whatever income that he has saved and gets as interest. So he says there's hardly anything left to make a very decent living at the fag end of one's life. So this is what I did have a conversation with one of the economic advisors of the government. Their answer to that was, see, we can't be covering everything in one go. There will be some uncovered portion. And this definitely is an uncovered portion. They admitted it. I would say, yes, this is a cause for concern. And as we all grow older and various sickness, illness takes over us, and where we are not able to retire or we are not able to retire with peace, I would suggest the government to look at it this way. Any income derived from retirement benefit of a person above 75 years should not be taxed. If it is put in some government bonds or some fixed deposits or something like that. I think we should bring our senior citizens above 75 out of the tax net. I think they have brought them out of the tax return net this time, subject to certain conditions. I would urge the government to bring them out of the tax net.
They have just made a mockery of the objective, sir.
Yeah, it was.
So there's a last question. You may choose not to answer this, sir. If Modi ji makes Swamiji as the finance minister, will it help us to achieve the 5 trillion economy?
Appointment of cabinet colleagues is the sole prerogative of the prime minister. If I become the prime minister, then I will think about it. But unfortunately, I'm not the prime minister. Neither am I thinking about bringing. So, of course, I can share on a lighter note since I've been greatly benefited by my conversation with both Dr. Swamy and Shri Gurumurthy ji on economics. As a chartered accountant, I feel that probably we are more competent to take on and understand the subject of economics rather from the rarefied field of economic theory. Then, and if we simply audit numbers comes naturally to us. We can give 2 numbers, we can write 3 theories and 4 PhDs about 2 numbers. So I think the time has come for this profession also to audit several of these macroeconomic issues that are being put forward. It could be a blog, it could be a tweet, it could be anything. But my favorite appeal to my fellow chartered accountants is, please audit everything that the government is putting forward and raise appropriate questions. Because this a $5 trillion economy cannot be allowed to go unaudited or audited only by the Babudam or by the CAD. We require every single chartered accountant to feel that he is a government appointed auditor. It could be any number that the government throws up. Please audit it. That will do a world of good for all of us.
One minute, sir. With this, we conclude the question, sir. You have any concluding remarks? 1 or 2 minutes?
No, sir. Thank you. I enjoyed. It's been a wonderful day and a time well spent. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I would formally close with a vote of thanks, sir, though we could not do when the presence of Swamy was there. It's my proud privilege to bid vote of thanks for this wonderful session. I can't do any better than formally thanking for the time taking out and participating. My special thanks to MRV sir in persuading Dr. Swamy to this session. Dr. Swamy's explanation on parameters for growth, the drivers to fuel the economy, the gas which government has to move to progress was exciting to listen. Even realizing the fault lines in economy was thrilling to know. I am reminded of how the Asian tigers have moved to where they are today. We must also be there in a celebration of this culture. But there is an innate meaning of this culture. The culture also embeds a different understanding in economy. You are thought-provoking on the strengths which India has. I thank you for this spell-bounded session filled with optimism, hope, and thought. Thank you for joining, sir. We will look forward for your future programs, conferences, and seminars of KSEA. Thank you.
Thank you.